What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I am back to you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. And finally, people, football season is upon us. College football is about to kick off in a week. We have the NFL season that's just around the corner. And I'm really excited to talk about it, man. Like, it's been a long couple of months. I've been watching preseason football. I watched a couple of college football games a couple of days ago. It was Illinois taking on Nebraska. You also had UCLA taking on Hawaii. But the real college football slate kicks off this weekend, week 0 of college football. They call it week 0, but I'm trying to figure out, okay, if this upcoming week is week 0, what was last week when UCLA was playing Hawaii? Was that week -1? I don't know what that was, but I mean, I'm really excited for this upcoming week of college football, man. We have some really great games on tap. We're going to have fans in the stands. It's going to make everything really exciting as well. Like, last year's college football season just felt weird, man, because, like, it's really not college football if you don't have the fans there, the bands. Like, it kind of takes away from what makes college football so special. And I feel like what makes college football so special is the tradition, the pageantry, the fans, like college football just didn't really feel like college football last year. So now this year, we're going to have all of that back. And we have some really great matchups. As a matter of fact, we have so many great matchups that I'm not going to be able to talk about all of them on just one episode. So on this episode, I'm going to be talking about Alabama taking on Miami, Indiana, Iowa, Penn State taking on Wisconsin, and Georgia taking on Clemson, the game of the week. Now, I'm going to be previewing my other games. I want to talk about Texas and Louisiana, UCLA and LSU, and the next episode that's going to be releasing tomorrow. So I'm really excited to talk about these games. If you are a new listener of the podcast, make sure that you go ahead and leave a 5-star review. We talk about college football and NFL football 24/7, 365 days a year over here on JT Sports. So the first game that I want to talk about, we have Alabama taking on Miami. This game is going to be played this Saturday with a 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time kickoff. And Alabama, as of right now, is a 18.5 point favorite. Now, this is a really big game for Manny Diaz heading into year 3 as the head coach for Miami. Now, this isn't a must-win game. Like, a lot of Hurricane fans out there are trying to say Manny Diaz needs to win this game. Like, I think that's a little bit, of a stretch to say that Manny Diaz needs to win this game. Like, there's a lot of Miami fans out there who always feel like Miami should be competing for a national championship every single year and things like that. And I've been trying to tell people, man, like, there are building blocks to this, okay? Manny Diaz going into year 3, this definitely is a really critical year, because when you look at the past couple of Miami head coaches, every single one of them has peaked during year 3. So I'm expecting a really big season out of the Hurricanes this year and Manny Diaz. And in my opinion, this is the most talented team that the Miami Hurricanes have put on the field in a very long time. I think this team is better than the 2017 team that won 10 games and lost to Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. And when you think about the expectations that people have for that team heading into the season, we knew they were going to be good, but nobody expected that team to be as good as what they were in 2017. And remember, that team wasn't all that great offensively. As a matter of fact, the offensive attack from that year was very average to below average. You were carried by the defense that season. Well, this year, not only are you going to have a great offense with offensive coordinator Rhett Lashlee going into year 2, but you also should have a pretty good defense this year. One thing that I think that Miami has in this game that a lot of people aren't talking about is I think that they have the experience factor on their side. And I don't think enough people are talking about that. All I keep hearing is, oh, Nick Saban is really good in opening games and things like that. But nobody's talking about how much experience this Miami Hurricanes team has compared to the Alabama team. Now, Alabama does have a lot of great players on defense who are returning, but on the offensive side of the football, Miami has a lot of veterans that are going to be on the field. You got Derrick King at QB. You have a really experienced offensive line. As a matter of fact, you could go out on a limb and say that this is the second best offensive line in the ACC, led by offensive tackle Zion Nelson, who as of right now is projected to be a top 15, top 10 pick in next year's 2022 NFL draft, which is something that the Miami Hurricanes haven't really had all that much of over the last couple of years. The offensive line has always seemed to be an Achilles heel for the Hurricanes. This year, instead of it being a weakness, it actually is a strength. You have a really good group of running backs, Cameron Harris, Rooster. Like, there's a lot of depth in this running back room. So you're going to be looking at this Miami Hurricane offense going against Alabama. This is going to be a really good test, man, because Alabama could have the best defense in all of college football. Like, Alabama's defense is going to be incredibly good. They have a lot of depth at every position. Corner, linebacker, defensive line. So Nick Saban a couple of days ago actually came out and he, talked about Derrick King. He talked about what he has to do, what Alabama has to do to get ready for Derrick King. And basically he said that Derrick King is a really great quarterback. He's really good throwing the football downfield. He's accurate and he's incredibly hard to stop when he gets outside of the pocket. And the biggest concern that a lot of people have about Derrick King is going to be, okay, how healthy is he going to be coming from that injury that he sustained a couple of months ago against Oklahoma State in that bowl game? Well, according to reports, Derrick King is pretty much close to 100%. So I expect Derrick King to have a really big impact in this game. And I know a lot of people are probably going to say Alabama is going to win this game. But when you have a superstar quarterback like Derrick King, there's not a game that you don't have a shot to win, okay? And one thing that Miami addressed that was really big for them that they struggled with last year was the talent at wide receiver. Outside of Mike Harley, you didn't really have anybody who was able to step up. You had a lot of inconsistency from the wide receiver position. So how does Miami address that? Well, they go in the transfer portal and they get Charleston Rambo transfer from Oklahoma. So now you have Mike Harley and Charleston Rambo, which is now one of the best wide receiver duos in the ACC right now. So I'm interested to see how this Miami offense is going to match up against that Alabama defense. Alabama has a lot of great corners. You have a really good defensive line, and this offensive line is going to get tested against Alabama's defensive line. And this is just a really good test to see just how far along this offense is, because last year Miami's offense was really good. And you got to take into consideration that this was with, all of the COVID restrictions going on, not really a lot of in-person practices. Brett Lashley was pretty much doing installs via Zoom meetings and whatnot. Now he has a real college football offseason, spring practice, fall camp to really implement what he wants to do with this Miami Hurricanes offense. So this is going to be a really exciting matchup that I'm excited to see. Now, of course, we got to talk about Alabama's offense. Bryce Young, who was a highly touted quarterback coming out of high school, is going to be making his first ever college football debut. Now, there's also a lot of new faces, not only at QB, but also on this whole entire offense, because this offense lost a lot of talent to the NFL. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Alex Leatherwood, a lot of guys went in the first round of this past year's NFL draft, and you're going to have a lot of new faces who a lot of people may not be familiar with, especially at wide receiver. Now, my thing is, okay, what does the Miami defense have to do to, get Bryce Young off guard? And I asked a couple of people about this, and a lot of people kept saying all Miami has to do is get pressure on Bryce Young, get in his face, hit him a couple of times, which all that sounds easy to do, but that's going to be a lot easier said than done, because I don't think enough people actually realize how good of a player Bryce Young is. Bryce Young reminds me a lot of Russell Wilson in terms of what he's able to do when things break down, being able to invade the rush, step up, move around the pocket, and wait and give his wide receivers extra time to get open. So if Miami wants to go ahead and test Bryce Young's skill set right away, then I think a lot of people are going to realize that fairly quickly, that I think the worst thing to do is try to get extra pressure by sending a lot of blitzes on Bryce Young and things like that, because I don't think that's going to vote well for the Hurricanes defense, because I think Bryce Young is at his best when he's under pressure and when he's going against the blitz. He has a very good arm. He's really good when it comes to reading the field. So Miami can go ahead and, send all the pressure they want to, but I actually think that's playing towards Bryce Young's strength. I think what makes him so good and why so many people are really high on him is because he's very good with a lot of traffic coming at him. He's very good under pressure. So if Miami wants to go ahead and do that, go ahead and be my guest, but I don't think that's going to vote too well for Miami, because you go ahead, you send a blitz, and then when he ends up hitting somebody for a 50-yard dot and they're going down the sideline, a lot of people are going to realize Bryce Young is really good under pressure. So I don't think the game plan for trying to make Bryce Young uncomfortable is going to be as easy as what some of you Hurricane fans make it out to be, because like I mentioned, Bryce Young, similar to Russell Wilson, is really good under pressure. So I think the best way to give Bryce Young a hard time in his debuts to, first of all, neutralize the Alabama run game, okay? So if you get rid of the run game and you make Alabama one-dimensional where they have to beat you throwing the football, then I think that's kind of when you can get Bryce Young uncomfortable, because then you can't rely on that run game, which then takes away from play action. So therefore, you keep Bryce Young in the pocket and you make sure that when the play breaks down, that he has nowhere else to go, that he has no running lanes to escape, which is going to be a lot easier said than done. But my biggest thing for Bryce Young is I don't want him getting outside of the pocket. I want to keep Bryce Young in the pocket. I want him to beat me from inside, because you allow him to get outside the pocket and you allow him to extend those plays, that's where a lot of things are going to go awry. So if you're Miami, you want to see if you can get pressure from your front four, which is another big interesting thing that we have to talk about, is going to be how's the pass rush for Miami going to look this year, because you lost Jalen Phillips, who got drafted in the first round by Miami, and you lost Quincy Roche. So you lost your two best pass rushers. How is the pass rush going to look this year for Miami? Now, Miami has always been pretty good when it comes to developing pass rushers, so I'm just eager to see what are going to be the next group of guys who are going to be able to make their presence felt when it comes to being able to get after the quarterback this year for Miami. Now, could Alabama's offense start out slow? And I know people aren't talking about this, but Miami's defense also returns a good amount of talent this year outside of the defensive line. The secondary has a lot of experience. Linebackers should be improved. So you're looking at the Miami Hurricanes defense that should be pretty solid this year. So if you're Alabama, I don't really think that this is just going to be a game that you're just going to sit here and just pick everybody apart, this and that, because Miami's defense has a lot of talent, and not only that, but a lot of experience also. So it's going to be really interesting seeing, a new Alabama, I won't say new Alabama offense, but new faces in the Alabama offense going against an experienced Miami Hurricane defense with a lot of veterans. Now, Miami's wide receivers are going to be a huge factor in determining and deciding the outcome of this game, because wide receiver was a huge weakness for Miami. I believe it was the biggest reason why Miami lost against Clemson. I understand the offensive line didn't play great that game, but the wide receivers had a hard time creating separation in that matchup against Clemson, and Derrick King was trying to escape, but Clemson was kind of clamping down the running lanes that Derrick King had. So this year, you look at the improved wide receiving core and the depth that Miami has, I want to see these wide receivers be able to create separation. I think that's going to be my biggest concern. If you're a Hurricane fan, it's going to be how these wide receivers are going to do against a really good Alabama secondary. Now, I know somebody's going to be like, well, you need to attack whoever's going to be replacing Patrick Surtain, which, okay, you can do that all you want to, but I mean, Alabama has a lot of great players at cornerback. So I think that wide receiver definitely is going to be a really important position to watch in determining if Miami's going to be able to pull off the big upset against Alabama week 0, because wide receiver last year was a big weakness that costed Miami a lot of games. So if wide receiver is going to be as good as what I think it should be with Mike Harley and Charleston Rambo, and they're able to create separation, I think that's going to vote well for the passing game. And on top of that, I think we could see a lot of big plays over the top against a really good but aggressive Alabama defense there. Now, will Miami's run defense struggle against Alabama's running game, which should be led by running back Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson didn't really hear a lot of his name called because he was behind Najee Harris, but he's going to be the next man up. We know how good Alabama is when it comes to producing great running backs. So Brian Robinson is next in that stable, and I think that Brian Robinson is going to be really productive. He's really good fighting off tacklers, good running through contact. He hits the hole really hard. And Miami's run defense last year was a little bit iffy, okay? Especially when you go back and you watch that North Carolina game. And no, I have not gotten that North Carolina game out of my head, and I don't think nobody else should have neither, because that was an absolute terrible game. There was poor linebacking play. You had linebackers who were in the wrong positions at times. They were missing holes. Not only were they missing holes, but they were missing tackles. Like, there was just a lot of things I went around that North Carolina game. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be like, okay, JT, that's last year. What about this season? Well, I'm still concerned, okay, because I'm not completely sold on a linebacker position for Miami when it comes to how these linebackers are going to be against the run. So if you're looking at Alabama and you're looking at a weakness to attacking that Miami Hurricanes defense, it definitely has to be the linebackers. So for me, if you're Nick Saban, if you can get that run game going early and you can get your offensive linemen to that second level, to that linebacking core of Miami, then I think you can have a good way of trying to keep De'Aaron King off the field. You can keep him off the field by controlling time possession. And on top of that, you tire out that defense, and then if you get a couple of stops here and there, maybe a turnover to go your way or something like that, then this game definitely is going to be tilted in towards your favor. And I think it's going to be really important that that run game gets going for Alabama, because when you have a young quarterback in Bryce Young, I don't think Alabama just wants to go ahead and just force him into, the action. I think they kind of want to ease him into it. I don't think Alabama wants to get Bryce Young throwing, passes his first couple of attempts. I don't think they want to air it out quite yet with Bryce Young. I think what they want to do is they kind of want to ease him into it, open things up with the run game, get play action going, use some RPOs, use some read options, and then they want to try to open things up downfield. You also have a new group of wide receivers also, aside from John Mechie. So when you look at the experience that Miami has defensively, I don't think enough people are talking about that. Everybody's talking about how great Alabama's defense is, how much experience they have, but nobody's talking about the experience that Miami has also. Miami also is a team that has a lot of starters returning from last year. So when you look at the whole dynamic of, Nick Saban, really good week 0, I think a lot of people have to understand something. A lot of people keep saying Alabama's going to win this game simply because they're Alabama and things like that. And that's kind of like a dumbass reason for predicting the winner of a game by the brand. Like, if we were just going off brands and, the logo on the side of your helmet or whatnot, then we would have the same teams in the college football playoffs year after year after year. If there was a time for Alabama to lose and get upset, this would definitely be the perfect time for that, because this is week 0. You have a lot of new faces on offense. You have a quarterback who's never started a college football game before, and you're going against a really talented Miami Hurricanes team. As a matter of fact, the best team that Miami has put on the field in damn near 2 decades. So if you're going to come out here and tell me Miami doesn't have a shot, I kind of want to say, I don't know. I think Miami has a better chance of winning this game than what 80% of you guys out there believe. Because if this was a game that was being played in the middle of the season or in the later half of the season, absolutely, I believe that Miami will have a legitimate chance of probably losing this game by 3 scores. But this is a game that's being played week 0. This is the first game that both these two teams are going to have. When you have an Alabama team that's replacing a lot of guys who went to the NFL, you're going to have a lot of new faces in there. Meanwhile, you have a Miami team that has a lot of veterans coming back. I kind of think that there is a better chance of an upset than what a lot of you guys are expecting. And most of the upsets that take place come week 0, week 1, the start of the college football season, because you have some things that are rusty. But there is a reason why Nick Saban is really good at these week 0 games, and that's because he normally has his team prepared to play. But at the same time, there is a good dynamic out there that maybe Alabama's offense comes out rusty. Maybe Miami gets a couple of turnovers early from Bryce Young, and that could could definitely dictate the outcome of this game. So I think that this is a really good chess match to watch in this game. You have two experienced defenses. You have the experienced offense of Miami with the Eric King going against the Alabama defense. And you have an experienced defense for Miami that's going against a very young Alabama offense with a lot of new faces in there. So the team I'm going to take to win this game, I'm going to take Alabama. The reason why I'm going to take Alabama is simply for the fact that I think Miami can keep this game close. But I think that we're going to see the reason why Nick Saban is so good in these, start of the season games is because I think he's going to be able to make some adjustments. He's going to be able to tweak some things. And I don't really know if Manny Diaz right now is going to be able to keep up with the coaching that Nick Saban and that staff is going to have. And don't get me wrong, I think Manny Diaz as of right now is a solid head coach. But I just think that we're going to see Nick Saban kind of put on a coaching clinic against Manny Diaz, and Manny Diaz also is going to have a big say in terms of what the defense is going to do this year. So I think there's going to be a lot of adjusting on the fly for Nick Saban, and I think that overall this game could be tight. But heading into the fourth quarter, I think that that's where we're going to see Alabama break away. So I think that Alabama is going to win this game. 34-24 is my final score prediction in this game. I don't think Miami's going to lose by like 3 touchdowns. As a matter of fact, I would be extremely surprised if Miami lost this game by 3 or more touchdowns. I think if Miami's going to lose, I think they lose by 10. So I'm definitely going to take Miami with the under. If I was betting on this game, okay, I don't think Alabama's going to cover, simply for the fact that I think Alabama's offense could start out a little bit rusty. I don't think enough people are giving the defense of Miami enough credit. Okay, everybody just thinks Alabama's offense is just going to come in this game and they're just going to pick off where they left off last year. I don't think that's going to be the case. Also, I think there's going to be a little bit of rust there, and you have a very good team with a lot of veteran experience there at every position. So for me, I think Miami will lose, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout like a lot of people are expecting it to be. I think Miami's going to lose this game by 10 points. And if this game does end up being a blowout in favor of Alabama, then this Alabama team is going to be extremely scary, because this is a very solid Miami Hurricanes team. This is the best team that Miami has put on the field in a very long time. The next game that we have to talk about, we have Indiana going on the road to take on Iowa. Iowa is a 3.5 point favorite heading into this game. Both of these two teams had very good seasons last year. Indiana went 6-2 under Tom Allen. Iowa went 6-2. And Iowa is a sleeper in the Big Ten. A lot of people are really high on Iowa this year. And Indiana's coming off a season where they pretty much came out of nowhere, and I don't really think enough people are taking Indiana seriously, and I definitely understand that, because Indiana was like the Cinderella story of college football. And normally when you have these teams who have these Cinderella stories, they kind of fall off the following year. Like, you remember Minnesota? Minnesota had a really good season back in 2019. And then last year, we kind of forgot about them because they weren't all that great. So when you look at Indiana, a lot of people are kind of, not really taking Indiana all that serious. I'm not saying nobody takes Indiana serious. I'm just saying that a lot of people aren't as high on Indiana like I am. I think Indiana, as a matter of fact, is the only team in the Big Ten that I trust to actually be able to compete with Ohio State. Now, this definitely is going to be a big game in terms of, testing if my theory of Indiana being the second best team in the Big Ten holds true. A lot of people feel like either Iowa, Wisconsin, or Penn State could be that team that could challenge Ohio State, but I think Indiana is the team that could do it. But this definitely is going to be a very big test in testing my theory there. Now, when it comes to Iowa, okay, how improved is Iowa's offense going to be? Now, Iowa, I'm not really expecting any schematic changes to the offense. We know what Iowa is. We know Iowa wants to get underneath center. They want to hand the football off. They want to run downfield, and they want to control time of possession. They want to chew off clock, and they want to rely heavily on their great defense. But last year, this offense definitely still was, kind of underwhelming for even Iowa standards. You know, they were 39th in the country in points per game. They were 86 in yards per game. They were one of the worst teams in the nation in converting on third down. And for Iowa, the passing game could have a rough time against this Indiana secondary. Now, I know when you look at the stats, you're going to say, well, JT, Indiana secondary, their pass defense wasn't great. But this was a defense that was really good at taking away the football. And I think that Indiana has the best cornerback duo in the Big Ten, led by Jalen Williams and Tywan Mullen. Both those guys are extremely great cornerbacks. On top of that, you also have Devin Matthews at safety there. So for Spencer Petras, okay, 57% completion percentage, 1,569 pass yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He has very good size. He has a really live arm. He can really sling the football downfield, but he struggles with accuracy. And on top of that, Iowa lost two of their best wide receivers in Amir Smith-Marset and Brandon Smith, who are no longer with the team anymore. They've moved on. So you lost your two best wide receivers. Yeah, you return tight end Sam Laporta and wide receiver Nico Ruggieri. They would come back, but I don't really know if Iowa really has the horses to really have an effective passing attack against Indiana in this game. So I definitely think that we're going to see Iowa's wide receivers struggle to create separation against a really good Indiana secondary. And I know what a lot of you guys are going to say. You're going to say Indiana's defense wasn't good. Look at the stats. You got to get off the stats. Like, this secondary was really good when it came to forcing turnovers. This is a really aggressive team. Now, I expect Iowa, if they're going to move the football, they're probably going to do it behind their offensive line. As always, they always have a great offensive line. And they're going to do it behind running back Tyler Goodson, who I expect to have a lot of touches in this game. Last year, he ran for 762 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns, and was averaging 5.3 yards per carry. And I think that he can end up being one of the best running backs in the Big Ten and one of the more underrated backs in college football at the end of this year, because I think he's going to be in for a very good year. I think Iowa's going to rely heavily on him because I don't really think they have a lot of depth and a lot of talent at wide receiver. And if they do, they need that talent at wide receiver to emerge fast because they're going to get tested. Now, when you look at Indiana on the other hand, okay, I'm concerned about their offensive line. Now, their offensive line wasn't really all that great, okay? I think it was average. This offensive line was really bad when it came to run blocking. And the run game for Indiana is a huge concern that I have this year because Indiana pretty much had to go air raid, which is okay when you're playing against, average to below average teams. But when you're playing against a team like Indiana, a team that likes to keep things close into the fourth quarter and that has a great defense, it's really important that you're able to maintain your balance offensively and that you're able to run the football, because when things get tight in the fourth quarter and you need a drive to, take some time off the clock and you can't do it, then that's mainly going to be a huge reason why you're going to lose those tight one possession games. And I think it's another reason why Indiana wasn't all that great converting the football on third down. As a matter of fact, they were 82nd in the nation last year in third down conversion percentage, converting on third down 37.9% of the time, which wasn't really all that great. So if Indiana is going to improve the third down conversion offense, or the third down offense is going to have to be able to start with the run game, because you have that run game there, you're going to be in some more manageable third down situations. And same thing goes for Iowa. Their third down offense was absolutely terrible. As a matter of fact, they had one of the worst third down offenses in all of college football, converting on third down 33% of the time. So when you look at the run game for Indiana, I definitely think the run game is going to be really important in this game. Not as important as it is for Iowa, because I believe that Indiana's passing attack is really good. They have a lot of talent at wide receiver. But my thing is, okay, when this game gets tight, and they need to be able to run the football to take some time off the clock, I don't really know if they're going to be able to do it. And it all starts with that offensive line. And the offensive line was also kind of shaky in pass protection as well. And you look at Iowa, who always has very good defensive line play. You don't really have any defensive linemen right now who are big names, who are household names, but they definitely have a pretty solid group. And they are probably going to end up rotating guys in and out. So I think you look at the depth that Iowa's going to have when it comes to their defensive line, I definitely feel like Iowa kind of has the advantage when it comes to up front against that Indiana offensive line. Now, when you look at the biggest talking point for Indiana's offense, it's going to be, okay, how healthy is quarterback Michael Penix Jr. going to be? So Michael Penix is expected to play in this game. Now, I've been looking at articles. I've been trying to find more things about Indiana, but, Indiana football isn't, the biggest football brand in the world like it is when it comes to their basketball team. So it's a little bit hard to find news about Indiana, but from the few reports that I was able to dig up, Michael Penix should be ready to play this game. Now, I don't know if he's going to be 100%, but if they're suiting him up, I guess he's going to be good enough. So I don't really know what kind of Michael Penix we're getting, but, if he plays and he's playing at his best, and I think Indiana's chances of winning this game are going to go up through the roof, because if you have a superstar quarterback in college football, that takes you a long way. Now, like I mentioned, okay, the offensive line for Indiana, how's that going to look against a very good defensive line in Iowa that's really good at rotating guys in and out and getting guys in the best possible situations? Now, my biggest thing is, okay, if Iowa goes down in this game by more than 2 touchdowns, they're going to be in a lot of serious trouble. And when I mean serious trouble, I think the game's probably going to be over. Now, if they're going into halftime with like a, down like 10-7 or something like that, then okay, I'm not worried. But if we're going into halftime and they're down multiple possessions, or we're going into the fourth quarter and they're down like 10 or more points, then I think that's going to be a problem, because Iowa's offense isn't a quick strike offense like Indiana's. You're not really going to have a lot of big plays downfield that are going to be manufactured for Iowa. So for Iowa, if this game is going to be a game that they're going to have to be able to win a shootout, I don't think that's going to be able to go towards their favor. But if this is a game that's going in, close in the fourth quarter, this is a game that I probably would like Iowa to pull off, because Iowa is a really scrappy football team. They live for those tightly contested contests going into the fourth quarter. And when you look at Indiana, I don't really think that this is a team that's going to be able to win against an Iowa team that's going to be able to keep things close in the fourth quarter, due to the fact that I don't really know how effective the run game is going to be for Indiana this year. And if you can't run the football, you're going to struggle to close out games, because that's how you're able to take time off the clock. And I definitely feel like Iowa's going to have a lot of success running the football against Indiana with how good their offensive line is. Indiana has a really good defensive line, don't get me wrong, but Iowa's offensive line are some maulers. So we know that Iowa, one thing that they do is that they churn out very good offensive linemen and tight ends, similar to Notre Dame and Wisconsin. So for me, I'm still going to go with Indiana to win this game, okay? The reason why I want to take Indiana to win this game is because, first, I don't think Iowa's offense is going to be able to score no points to beat Indiana. Their defense is going to keep them in the game, okay? But at the end of the day, I don't know how effective Iowa's offense is going to be in being able to maintain drives. And it doesn't matter how good of a defense you have if you struggle to move the ball offensively, because eventually your defense is going to have to keep on coming on the field, and eventually they're going to get gassed and they're going to get tired. So I think by the time we get midway through the third quarter, that's where we're going to start to see Indiana pull away in this game. So I'm going to take Indiana with the under. I think they're going to win this game 24-14 is my final score prediction in this game. Okay, I think this game is going to be really tight as we get through the third quarter, but midway is where I think we start to see Indiana kind of pull away, because I just don't really trust that Iowa offense. You lost your 2 best playmakers at wide receiver. Your quarterback situation is a problem, but, I'm just worried about the lack of talent they have at that position. So I'm going to have to take Indiana with the win. You guys let Okay, so the next game that I want to talk about, we have Penn State traveling on the road to take on Wisconsin. Wisconsin currently, as of right now, is a 4.5-point favorite. Now, when you look at Wisconsin last year, Wisconsin got derailed by COVID and injuries. You see, a lot of people have the misconception that Wisconsin doesn't really have a lot of talent at wide receiver or around Graham Mertz, and that's false, okay? Like, Wisconsin has enough talent that they can challenge for the Big Ten, okay? They're pretty solid at wide receiver with Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor. You also have tight end Jake Ferguson, who is one of the best, if not the best, tight end in all of college football. So there is plenty of talent around for Graham Mertz to have success. Now, are they incredibly deep at wide receiver? Probably not, but they do have a solid supporting cast around Graham Mertz. You see, what threw off Wisconsin last year was COVID and injuries, okay? You had Graham Mertz who came down with COVID. He was out for a pretty significant amount of time, and then you had injuries to some of your key players, and that kind of is what derailed the offensive production for Wisconsin last year. So as long as everybody stays healthy, I think that Wisconsin's offense should definitely improve, because Wisconsin offensively wasn't the team that we are accustomed to seeing, okay? When you think of Wisconsin football, you normally think of a team that likes to run the football down your throat, doesn't have a lot of turnovers, and that's something that we saw a lot of Wisconsin last year. So I definitely feel like they should have those issues taken care of. And on top of that, I think with Graham Mertz at QB, I think they really have found somebody who can get them over that hump. Because if you want to be able to win a conference title, be able to make it into the college football playoffs nowadays, you have to have an above average to star quarterback, and I think that's definitely what Graham Mertz can be. Like, I think Graham Mertz may be the most talented quarterback that Wisconsin has had since Russell Wilson transferred a couple of years ago from NC State to Wisconsin. So I believe in Graham Mertz. I understand, last year had some ups and downs. He was really good at the start of the season. Then the second half of the season, he kind of fizzled out. But I think with everybody coming back fully healthy and having a really good offensive line, he should have a really good year. And same thing for Penn State, okay? Sean Clifford kind of had an up and down year. He started the season not really slow, but he started to pick things up as we neared towards the end in the second half. So in this game, I think that these two quarterbacks, with the supporting cast that they have around them, they should be able to have pretty solid games. But the thing is, with Sean Clifford, he's going against one of the best defenses in all of college football in Wisconsin. Wisconsin last year, in my opinion, had the best defense in the nation. That defense was absolutely lights out. They were good against the pass. They were good against the run. Wisconsin's defense this year should pick off from where they left off last year. Now, they did lose a couple of players, but the majority of the defense should be back. I think they're going to be returning at least 8 or 9 starters, I believe. I don't really know the number exact. I know it's either 8 or 9, but Wisconsin's defense is going to be phenomenal. And when I look at Penn State's offensive line going into this game, I'm kind of concerned about it, okay? They have talent at offensive tackle, but the interior of the offensive line concerns me, especially at guard. So I don't really know how that's going to fare against a very good and stout Wisconsin defense. And on top of that, when you look at Wisconsin, if they get into a shootout with Penn State, I don't think they're going to win. And the reason why I don't think they are capable of winning a shootout with Penn State is simply for the fact that I really like Penn State's corners. You have cornerback Tyreek Castro-Fields. You got Joey Porter. You have safety Waquan Brisker. So Penn State's secondary is pretty solid. And I kind of question if Wisconsin has the horses offensively to be able to get into a shootout with Penn State if the game goes in that direction. So if this game teeters towards somebody having to be able to crack 40 points or a high 30-point mark, I probably would roll with Penn State, simply for the fact that I think that this offense is built for those high-scoring affairs. I don't really think Wisconsin's offense is built for these high-octane games where you have to be able to score a lot of points to win. So that's something that I am going to keep track of during this game. It's going to be the cornerback position of Penn State against the wide receivers of Wisconsin, because they do have two solid ones in Danny Davis and Kendrick Pryor, but I want to see if they have any more depth outside of that. Now, at the same time, is Penn State going to be able to get pressure on Graham Mertz? Because Wisconsin has one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. Penn State, on the other hand, they didn't really have a great pass rush last year. They struggled to get pressure on the quarterback consistently. And when you look at Wisconsin, if they're able to get that run game going and Penn State struggles to stop the pass, then Wisconsin is going to have an absolute field day against Penn State's defense, and they're most likely going to win the game. Because when you think about Wisconsin, if they're able to get that run game going in this game, something that they kind of struggled to do last year, they're going to be able to control time of possession, and that's going to limit the amount of possessions that Penn State's offense is going to be on the field, and that's going to gas out that defense really quickly. So for Penn State, okay, I think that pass rush has to definitely find a way to get going, because the pass rush wasn't going last year. So this year, I'm trying to figure out where's that pass rush going to come from. Now, the next thing is going to be, okay, which team can get the run game going? Both these teams' run games were pretty average to below average, to say the least, especially for Wisconsin. They were 64th in the nation in rushing yards per game, which is a really disappointing season when you think about how effective Wisconsin has been over the last couple of years of running the football with guys like Melvin Gordon and Jonathan Taylor. So for Wisconsin this year, with the offensive line improving, the offensive line wasn't bad last year, but with the offensive line pretty much about to become elite, that should improve the running game. And with the running game improving, that's going to open up shots for Graham Mertz to attack the field using play action. And I also think with Wisconsin and helping out in the run game department, that's going to help this team out in third down situations, because Wisconsin had one of the worst third down offenses in all of college football last year. So when you look at that Wisconsin third down offense, if you're able to run the football effectively, if you get down to a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 situation, you can still choose to either pass the football or run the football if need be. And I think Jalen Berger could be out for a breakout season. Last year, he wasn't all that bad, but with the offensive line improving this year, I think he's probably going to end up being one of the more underrated backs in the country. Now, for Penn State, okay, if you can get your run game going, that's good, but I don't think it's a necessity in order for them to win this game. Like, even if they do have to throw the football, I still think they have a good shot at winning, even if the run game isn't effective, because they have a lot of depth and a lot of guys who they can rotate in at wide receiver. Versus Wisconsin, they only have like 2 good options in the pass game at wide receiver, and then you have Jay Ferguson there. So I think for Wisconsin, it's more important that they get the run game going compared to Penn State. So when I look at Penn State, okay, this is a team that was really good offensively at times this last year, even though you did have some inconsistency at quarterback. But overall, this is an offense that is really dynamic and really explosive. Now, Wisconsin's defense is still going to be really good. So, me personally, I am going to take Wisconsin to win this game. 20-13 is going to be my final score prediction. I'm really high on Wisconsin's defense. I feel like Wisconsin's defense is going to be able to force a turnover or two. And on top of that, I just don't really trust Penn State's defense to be able to get off the field and be able to get key stops when need be. They weren't really good getting pressure on the quarterback last year. Hopefully that can change. But even then, I think Wisconsin's offensive line is just so dominant that they're going to be able to maul their way over the Penn State defensive line. So I think that Wisconsin is going to end up getting the victory 20-13. You guys let me know who you guys have winning this game down in the comment section down below. And this game could probably go either way, but I just trust Wisconsin a little bit more. Even though they don't have, as dynamic of an offense that Penn State has, they have a way better defense and they're way better up front. And for Penn State, their offensive line is still pretty shaky. Okay, you have tackle figured out, but I don't know how the guard position is going to be looking for Penn State. So I just think that Wisconsin is just going to be able to win this game. I think that they're going to be able to play the kind of style of ball that they want to, that we're accustomed to seeing from the Badgers over the last couple of years. Ball control, run the football, try to open things up with play action. And I don't really think that Penn State's defensive line is going to be able to handle Wisconsin's offensive line up front. So I'm going to take Wisconsin with the win here. Moving on to now the last game that we have to talk about, we have Georgia taking on Clemson. Clemson is currently a 3-point favorite. This is my game of the week. I had a very hard time trying to take down notes for this game, trying to figure out what to talk about because these two teams are pretty evenly matched. These are two of the best teams in all of college football heading into the upcoming season. And these are two teams that we very well could see competing for the championship in the next couple of months. But when you look at Clemson, I think that this definitely is a must-win game for them. And I know you may be like, JT, how is this a must-win game for Clemson? Like, this is like week 0 of the college football season. There's still a lot of football to go, and I understand that. But the reason why I feel like this is a game that Clemson must win is because Georgia has a really tough conference that they play in called the SEC. So if they lose this game, they could still get in with how tough their schedule is. Clemson, on the other hand, the ACC isn't all that tough for them. So after this game, if they lose, then they're probably going to have to play a hope that a couple of other teams in the ACC kind of rise up throughout the cracks and that they can get ranked. And then hopefully you can either play a ranked North Carolina team or a ranked Miami team in the ACC championship game. So I think for Clemson, their road to the college football playoffs is going to be incredibly difficult if they lose this game. And I hate talking about the college football playoffs so early and things like that, but that's just something that I have to address. But my main concern for Georgia is not wide receiver. Like, I don't know why people keep trying to say that Georgia doesn't have a lot of depth and talent at wide receiver. Like, that narrative is just so false. Like, I understand that George Pickens is not going to be playing. We don't even know if he's going to be able to suit up this year because he suffered an injury earlier in spring camp, But you still do have Kearis Jackson. You have Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton is a really good deep threat. Kearis Jackson was really good also last year. And then Eric Gilbert, is he going to be able to play in this game or not? Currently, he's listed as questionable due to personal issues. But even if he doesn't play, like, Georgia still does have Kearis Jackson and Jermaine Burton. Those are two really good options. And then on top of that, I'm pretty sure that they can find another third or fourth guy on their depth chart who can end up stepping up and having a very solid game. So I don't really think that the talent and depth at wide receiver is a problem. The thing is that you just have a lot of unknown factors when it comes to the wide receiver position outside of Jackson and Jermaine Burton, which is why I think a lot of people have a lot of concerns because, you always fear what you don't know. But I'm not too concerned about the talent and depth that Georgia has. Now, I'm really intrigued in seeing how different this UGA offense is going to look because last year Todd Monken was able to come in and he wasn't really able to implement what he wanted to do offensively due to COVID, having, not really a legitimate off season. Pretty much you didn't really have a spring camp. Fall camp was kind of limited. So you were doing everything basically installs and trying to teach the plays and whatnot via Zoom meetings. So on top of that, you had Stetson Bennett at quarterback for like the first portion of the season because you thought Jamie Newman was going to be the guy, but Jamie Newman decided to opt out and declare for the NFL draft and practice and whatnot. So the quarterback situation didn't really help, the change offensively. And Stetson Bennett, he was all right, but eventually we knew what Stetson Bennett was. Stetson Bennett was a guy who was going to be able to, win you a couple of games when you had to face a team like Alabama or Florida and you really need a quarterback who can step up and make the big plays when it mattered the most. Stetson Bennett wasn't really going to be able to do that. So when JT Daniels came in, the Georgia offense kind of transformed a little bit. So I'm interested in seeing how different this offense looks now that JT Daniels and Tom Monken have a legitimate real offseason to work with, a real spring camp, a real fall camp. And I think that this probably could be the best offense that we've seen out of Georgia in a very long time. On top of that, the run game in this game, you're going to have James Cook and Zamir White, the best running back duo in all of college football. You have a really good offensive line. Now, when you look at Clemson, your main concern is probably going to be who is going to be replacing Travis Etienne and not so who's going to be replacing Trevor Lawrence, because we already know that DJ Uiagalelei is a baller. He balled out when Trevor Lawrence couldn't play against Notre Dame. He had a really great game. So I think that DJ Uiagalelei should be able to pick up right where Trevor Lawrence left off, and I think that they're going to continue their dominance at the quarterback position. You also have Justin Ross returning at wide receiver. That helps out a lot. And and you have the best offensive line in the ACC. Now, when it comes to the run game, I don't really think the run game is going to be that effective in this game for two reasons. One, Clemson is kind of going to be running like a running back by committee. You have Lynn Dixon, Kobe Pace, and Will Shipley. And I don't really think that if you are a Clemson fan that you're going to have your answer in terms of who's going to be the RB1 for the remainder of the season after this game, because I don't really think Clemson is going to have that much success running the football against the defensive line of Georgia. And I understand that Clemson has a very good defense, a really good offensive line, but this defensive line for Georgia, their front seven is completely different. You have Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, Adam Anderson, Quay Walker. Like, there are a lot of NFL bodies on this defensive line for Georgia. Not only can they get after the quarterback, but they are also very stout against the run. This defensive line reminds me a lot of the defensive line that Auburn had a couple of years back when you had Marlon Davidson and Derek Brown. It was basically a brick wall. That's what this defense reminds me of. And I'm not trying to say Clemson's offensive line is bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think that Georgia's defensive line is really going to make it tough on Clemson being able to run the football effectively. Now, in terms of comparing these two defenses, these are two very good defensive units. These two defensive units could very well be two of the best in all of college football. But even though I do like the front seven of Georgia more than I like Clemson's, in this game I like Clemson's secondary a little bit more than I like Georgia's secondary. The reason for that is because Georgia is going to be without defensive back Tyke Smith, who is doubtful to play in this game with a foot injury. So when you look at Clemson secondary, you have Andrew Booth, who is really good. You have Fred Davis at cornerback, who is highly touted coming out of Jacksonville, coming out of Trinity Christian, and you guys know I'm from the city of Jacksonville, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think Fred Davis is going to be a stud. You also have Landon Zanders there at safety, Nolan Turner. So I kind of like the secondary of Clemson a little bit more in this game compared to the secondary of Georgia. You got Darion Kendrick there. You're going to have Amir Speed starting at the other cornerback spot, but I just like Clemson's secondary a little bit more. Now, if Tyke Smith was playing in this game, then I probably would side with Georgia. But I like the secondary of Clemson in this game, and that's going to be really exciting to watch because Georgia is going to try to push the football downfield more than what they have done in the past. This should be a very good passing attack that a lot of Georgia Bulldog fans are expecting a lot of with JT Daniels at QB. So for that Clemson secondary, I want to see how they're going to perform. And Clemson's secondary was kind of up and down last year, in my opinion. Like, they had some really good games. They also had some really bad games also. But when you look at the biggest deciding factor in this game, okay, it's really going to come down to how good is Clemson's offensive line going to be when it comes to protecting DJ Uiagalelei, because you have some locomotives coming at you on that defensive line for Georgia, and this is the best defensive line in all of college football because they have some guys. So for Clemson to be able to win this game, man, like, they're going to have to be able to hold their own, which I believe that they do have a good chance of being able to do that, but I do feel like there's going to be some key moments during the game where that pass rush from Georgia is going to kind of find a way to break loose, and they're going to be extremely disruptive. I don't expect Georgia just to be dominating the line of scrimmage for the whole entire game, but I do feel like Clemson's offensive line is going to have some hiccups here and there just because of how much talent is on this Georgia defensive line. Like, there are a lot of guys on this defensive line who are going to be playing on Sundays, a lot of NFL bodies. So when I look at Clemson, like, definitely it's going to come down to DJ Uiagalelei because I don't really think they're going to have a lot of, effectiveness running the football against that stout Georgia front seven. Now, on the other hand, Clemson also has a very good defensive line. A lot of you Clemson fans are going to be like, hey, don't forget about our defensive line either. Your defensive line is right up there. Now, it's not as talented as Georgia's, but it's definitely in that conversation as one of the 5 best D-lines, top 10 in all of college football. Now, when you look at JT Daniels, I definitely feel like JT Daniels when he does get pressure in his face, he kind of does get a little bit rattled at times. I'm not saying he's bad against pressure. I'm just saying that sometimes he does tend to get a little bit rattled here and there. Now, for Clemson, they're going to have their hands full trying to contain the run game with James Cook and Zamir White. So it's kind of pick your poison in terms of how you want to attack this offense. So for me, I'm going to take Georgia to win this game. I think that a lot of people are kind of underestimating Georgia simply for the fact that you don't know the status of Reed Gilbert. They don't really know how much talent Georgia has at wide receiver. Georgia is really good up front on both sides of the football. They have the best offensive line or the second best offensive line in the SEC this year. And you have the best D-line in all of college football. And I really feel like this defensive line is going to give Clemson a lot of problems in this game. Okay, I know Clemson's offensive line is pretty good, but I just think that the men that Georgia has on their defensive line are just built different. Like I'm trying to tell you guys, a lot of people don't understand the entourage and the manslaughter that Georgia's defensive line is about to put on a lot of teams this year. And I do think that there's going to be some key moments where that pass rush is going to come into play, and it's going to affect several scenarios in the game. Maybe it'll be a red zone scenario where somebody's able to break through and get a key stop on the goal line, or maybe somebody's able to get a big sack on third down. Like, I definitely feel like the pass rush for Georgia is going to be heavily effective this season and in this game. And even if you do have questions about, Georgia's secondary, you can be like, well, JT, what about Georgia's secondary? Okay, if you have a good defensive line that can create pressure on the quarterback constantly, that's going to help out that secondary, because then those guys aren't going to have to be in coverage for that long. So I'm going to take Georgia to win this game. I think Georgia wins 34-30. This game is going to be extremely tight, extremely close, but I think Georgia is going to end up pulling off the win in this game. So you guys let me know who you guys have winning this game down in the comment section down below, and I appreciate you guys listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.